Thank you. So this is a topic that the planning board has spent a lot of time on. Stand up so I can see you all. And this is what I think we need to do at Alameda Point. First and foremost, we need to complete the negotiations with the Navy. They still haven't been completed. We have an agreement now, once again, for a no-cost transfer. That's a good thing. But the final agreements about level of cleanup, that's a big thing, haven't finished. So we're desperately hoping, and I know the council and the negotiators are working toward a closure of that before the end of this calendar year. Because until we do that, we can't do anything. It doesn't belong to us. It's federal land. Now, the planning board will have coming before it sometime in the fall the recommended approval of a zoning ordinance amendment for Alameda Point, because you may or may not know this, but Alameda Point currently is still zoned for the uses that were made of it during World War II when it was a naval base. It is zoned M2G, which is General Industry Government Overlay. So the reason that the planning board, and it will go on to the city council, so wants to get this zoning done is so that the objectives that were developed over the course of years since 1996, we have a community reuse plan. There have been many community meetings since then, different iterations of the plan, but really all with the same ideas in mind, a mix of employment, open space, recreation, residential, and retail uses. It is important that we maintain some flexibility in zoning because things change over time. Sometimes you think one sector of the economy is strong and you're going that way. You think LBNL is coming, they don't come. But if we have the zoning overlay district in place, then we know when people come to develop, we the city, will tell them where we want these different uses to be, rather than us being at the mercy of, say, a master developer who looks at this and says, here's what I want to do. We will say, and it's spelled out in the community reuse plan, these are the logical areas for residential and all the uses that I mentioned. Now, the housing part, we all know in Alameda we have something called Measure A. We've had a lot of Measure A's, but this one is the one that goes back to 1973, and it, among other things, limits density. Now, recently when the planning board and then the city council passed the updated housing element, bringing us into compliance with state law for the first time in 12 years, we included something that I thought was very inspired. It is called the Multifamily Overlay Zoning District, which allows us, in compliance with state law, in 10 specified areas of the city, again, not Alameda Point, because that doesn't belong to us yet, but in 10 specified areas of the city to build multifamily housing. And it's done in a very careful way, very well planned, where it would make sense to have multifamily, anything more dense than a duplex, a triplex, a fourplex, townhomes, what have you. We can do the same sort of thing at Alameda Point, because one of the important things, important elements of Alameda Point planning was to make it transit-oriented and sustainable. So there needs to be a transit hub around the ferry terminal, at the Seaplane Lagoon, and these are the most logical places to put multifamily housing. We can do all these things. It's not an overnight process, but the first step is get that zoning done, listen to the community, and move forward from there. Thank you. We're just going down the line.
Yeah. Regarding Alameda Point, I support the City Council's decision to proceed with master infrastructure planning, and I also support a base-wide EIR that the City Council has approved. I endorse the principle of development in phases at the point, because I think we don't know what segment of the economy is going to recover first, but I think the overall planning for infrastructure is important because one phase may actually go first, and we want everybody's infrastructure and everybody's sewer lines and what have you to tie into one another. So I think that's really important. I believe that the development of the adaptive reuse area should really go first, because I think that's the area that's most likely to bring in revenue for the city of Alameda. That's the area where we can lease out existing buildings to people and have them hopefully rehab the buildings, update the infrastructure, and bring in lease monies to the city. John Russo's talked to me about the possibility of keeping the leases that we have and extending them, keeping that revenue coming into Alameda, but maybe going out for a master lease rather than going for individual leases. I think that's an interesting and intriguing concept to explore, because that would bring an infusion of capital into the city. It might not bring us ultimately the same amount, but it would put risk and the burden on a leaseholder, a master leaseholder, to go forward. I think that's an interesting concept to explore. Based on what I've heard from Andrew Thomas, a fully developed point must include approximately 160 units of affordable housing. The no-cost conveyance capped the housing units at 1425, and we've heard 1435, 1450, but 1425 I think is the number. That's because 25% of 1425 is 360, and the collaborative 200 units counts toward the 360, so that leaves 160. What will these new units look like and where will they go? I can't say, because the economics have to work for a developer, because as you know, we can't afford $600 million of infrastructure. But we need to make it part of an attractive package for a developer and go forward from there.
Great. The question is about, as a result of the loss of redevelopment, how are we going to deal with the $600 million in infrastructure costs, and it might be even higher than that. So let me address the issue regarding financing of Alameda Point. I think to begin with, certainly we need to look at sources of federal funds. One source of federal funds is obviously the historic preservation tax credit. Dollars which would be very good in terms of preserving a lot of the job-generating buildings that we already have there. So that's one. Another federal dollars that we want to take a look at is a new dollars. It's called EB5, which is investment dollars from foreign individuals who bring in dollars to help people rejuvenate certain areas. And in exchange for the EB5 investment, the foreign individuals also get certain rights or regarding becoming legal immigrants here in the United States. So EB5 is certainly something to take a look at. In terms of state dollars, I think we definitely need to tap the State Infrastructure Bank to see what's available there. Also, in terms of state dollars, while we have lost redevelopment, bear in mind that the state legislature right now is actually taking a look at coming up with a new, more focused redevelopment that deals specifically on infrastructure. So certainly we want to encourage the new legislation that's coming down the pike with regard to infrastructure redevelopment. There's also local dollars that we need to think about. Now, if you think about it, remember, Harbor Bay Isle was done without redevelopment dollars. It was done with Melrose. So we certainly want to take a look at Melrose as a potential. Another certain local dollars that we want to take a look at in dealing with the $600 million in infrastructure costs is, remember, redevelopment is gone, but property taxes are still being generated. Now, for every $1 in property taxes, the city of Alameda gets 26 cents, and the 74 cents then gets divvied up by the different taxing entities. That 26 cents for every $1 in property taxes, we might contemplate using some portion of it towards infrastructure. On a final note, in terms of the affordable housing program, because that was the other aspect of the project, if elected council member, I'm committed to the 25% set aside, not up to 25%, but 25%, because that was a proud accomplishment that I did in conjunction with Mayor Apposado and the other council members, and that was the trade-off for getting Bayport going. And proudly worked with the affordable housing activists in generating that agreement back in 2002. So the 25% in my mind is still our responsibility and obligation, not a goal.
Alameda Point, 918 acres of real estate. How are we going to create and build infrastructure that will cost us $600 or more million in cost? I like to see we work in collaboration. First, we got to address the toxic substance. Above ground, underground. We can't market Alameda Point, but we don't clean it up. And the Navy is supposed to clean it up. Work with the EPA, pressure the Navy to start cleaning up Alameda Point. Then we can talk about infrastructure. First, we can. I like some of the ideas we can toss around the master lease, either with PM Realty or maybe another master lease who can start leasing out some of the historic sites or part of Alameda. Alameda Point. Use that lease revenue to maybe create a bond or to start fixing some of the infrastructures. And also, if we want to really look at Alameda Point and develop it, we have had 2 master developers, and both of them pulled out. Let's do it in phases, in increments, maybe 1 bite at a time. 980 acres is a lot of property. Maybe we'll do a fraction of it, maybe a portion of it, 1 step at a time. Or also, I heard the VA is trying to move into Alameda Point to build a cemetery or a clinic. Why not shift the focus towards the 918 acres instead of the northwest territory? So there's a lot of ideas that we can do. And the beauty is, we have the Alameda Point for free, 0 convenience. We can be very creative. We can entice, we can market Alameda Point to a lot of investors and developers. As far as 25% affordable housing policy, I am very supportive. Not because the state mandated, not because the regional housing allocation mandates it, not because we have a policy that says 25%, but it's because there is a shortage in Alameda. I was on the social service board, and when we did our citywide needs assessment, guess what's on number 1 and 2 on the needs of our underserved housing and childcare? Not because people say we have to, but there is a lack of housing in Alameda, and I support it completely. I guess that's all I have to say, and thank you.
Thank you. So right off the bat, I want to make sure everybody understands that my position is that 25% housing is a necessity and that it will happen. Now, some of it can't happen at Alameda Point. We would have to do some voting in order to change Measure A to do that. But let's talk about the point itself and what we can do immediately, because we have infrastructure out there right now. And I have a 2-step process that I would like to see happen. The first would be utilize the existing buildings that we have right now. There's a great example that Alan Marchand, who has the Auctions by the Bay, just took a large building and is using that, and the city is now deriving rent from that. There are a number of buildings out there that are usable, and we can get those filled. If there are problems with toxics or with retrofitting, one of the ways that commercial realtors deal with that is they give away rent. Now, we're not getting any rent on those buildings right now, so 6 months or a year's worth of rent while they clean it up and shore them up so that in case there is an earthquake, the building doesn't fall down, we would be able to get that initial rent coming in. That's virtually 100% coming in for us. I would keep that rent in a reserve for infrastructure. And I got some experience with infrastructure because I worked a lot in Hayward with mobile homes that were built in the 60s, and their infrastructure was not the best in the world. And what park owners used to tell me is that your infrastructure doesn't all fail at the same time. So you're not necessarily looking at it putting in $600 million worth of infrastructure all at one time. So you can get some revenue coming in. But moving forward, and I'm going to just do a little anecdote, and that has to do with Alameda Landing. I've been involved with Alameda Landing since 2005 with Bike Alameda. And when that first came and was approved, we took a look at it. There was so much warehousing, so much office, and so much residential. And then we got a call 2 years later. The market had shifted. And we needed to look at that again and say, now we're going to respond a little bit differently because that's the market. We said, okay, fine, and we still had good bike paths. I think it was 3 years later, same thing again. So I want to make sure that we have the flexibility, that our entitlements, if we do decide to entitle, that they're done in such a way that give us that flexibility so that we can respond. One of the nice things about the city is that when LB&L decided they were going to look at Alameda Point, look how fast we responded. And I believe that we can respond again because we've got a great staff to do that. And those are my short-term ideas. And as far as the housing, I think co-housing and senior housing and live workspace,